Hello everybody, welcome to the Boxing Science Podcast. This is episode 2. Again, I've got with me my esteemed colleague, Dr. Alan Ruddock. Alan, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Today, we're going to be talking about lockdown and all the different aspects to it. Training, nutrition, psychology as well. There's a lot of things that athletes and coaches need to kind of manage and control. And today we're going to go through a few things that we've been doing ourselves, some things that we encourage athletes and coaches to do, not only from a training perspective, but from a lifestyle perspective as well. If you're new to the channel, if you're new to the podcast, please hit the subscribe button. Please give us a rating and follow us, because we're going to be sharing a lot of kind of knowledge and experience over the coming weeks. So let's start off, Alan. Let's just talk about our own training, our own kind of adaptations towards lockdown.
Well, I am currently on the Red Zone Running 10K plan. So I'm following that. And that is 2 HIIT sessions a week and then 2 longer runs a week. So the runs I've done at the moment, I did Vavavoom last week, which is 30 on, 30 off, times 12, 2 sets. And then the week before that, I think, was Master Plan. I can't remember what it is this week, somewhat brutal. But my long runs, I've been doing anywhere between 45 and 45 minutes and an hour, zone 1. So for me, that's anything below 140 beats per minute, RPE of 2, very light. Yesterday, I had a really good run. Felt like I was a runner again yesterday. It came and it clicked. So I'm supposed to be doing these long runs at 11 kilometers per hour when my target 40 minute, when my 10K target's 40 minutes. So I ran yesterday at average speed of 11.7 kilometers an hour and average heart rate 140 beats per minute, which is zone 1, which is above where it needs to be. So I felt like a bit of a runner yesterday. I felt like it were coming together. And then I've been doing other rides on Zwift as well. So the turbo trainer in my garage. Longest ride I've done so far is 75 kilometers, which took 2 hours, 45 minutes. But I've been doing anywhere between an hour and a half on there. And then I've been doing some of your garden workouts as well. I've got a dumbbell, so I've been doing some single dumbbell work. I've been doing some weighted vest work as well. I've got a 7K med ball. And I measured my garden out the other day, and it's actually long enough for me to do a bleep test and a yo-yo test. So watch out for that. And I've seen some back garden marathons as well. So I dared Bex to do a marathon in the back garden, but she's not having it.
Imagine that. Well, you're showing off with your massive garden. I haven't got space to do like 2 meter accelerations on mine, if anybody's been watching the videos. But yeah, in terms of like my training, I've been enjoying it, like kind of varying it up every day. Some days I might do something that'll be more specific to boxing. I like to share them videos. Like I did like the towel isometrics with post-activation potentiation, doing some more explosive activities. But I've been enjoying kind of like going back to the good old days of like doing some bodybuilding sets, doing some upper body pumps and everything like that. So it's been good to kind of like just have things kind of accessible, really. Like normally when I'm in the gym, when I'm coaching, I'm like, because I'm there all day, I'm like, right, I don't really want to train here. I want to kind of get in a different kind of mindset to be able to train. But then that takes a long time to kind of travel to the other gym. Obviously getting parked up, getting in there, getting warmed up. And I've just been like kind of training in my back garden, doing a quick fire warm up, getting training straight away. I'm done within an hour, and it's probably saving me a good 2 hours out of my day. So I've been enjoying just kind of that accessibility and challenging myself in kind of finding new ways to train, different ways to challenge myself. And I feel like I've become a better coach because of it. If I was ever going to go into an interview, I'd say one of my key attributes is being adaptable, because I've worked with many different kinds of athletes. I work with England Golf, where I can work with like a 13-year-old girl, and then like the next session I'll be working with a heavyweight boxer, or a championship level boxer. And the level of kind of like what you have to change your training wise, your characteristics, how you engage with that athlete is very different. So I would say that quite adaptable, but also is adapting to different facilities. I've just mentioned golf there. When I do the squad training days up at the golf club, I'm big in a function room where we've got to basically move the tables and the chairs out to the side to be able to do some sort of like kind of body weight workout. When I've been on training camp, you've only got access to the hotel gym or a gym within like a certain mile radius. Sometimes it's not going to be perfect, and we live in this world where things can be perfect for us. We have got access to all the facilities, and we don't have to really think outside the box. And I think like this has given me the opportunity to think outside the box, be able to adapt our kind of training methods. But this is kind of what we try and preach anyway. When we do our online content, when we do our physical workshops, everything's geared towards making our training methods accessible to whatever your facilities and training environment is. We know that we're very fortunate to be at Sheffield Hallam University, access to thousands of pounds worth of equipment, being able to do literally any kind of training method. But we know that if we were just doing our courses on how to do this and not showing people how to kind of adapt that to their training environment, then the message that we're putting out there would be pretty useless, really.
Yeah, it's like when we're down doing the workshops down in London, we don't have access to the thousands of pounds of equipment that we do at the university. There's not even any treadmills down there. So we take our training sessions that we would do on the treadmill at the university, and we do them in the car park. And anybody can do these sessions that we do. You don't always need to have a lactate analyzer, a £100,000 treadmill to be able to do the session. And I think that is definitely one of the things that we try and communicate to everyone, is that these things, these methods are accessible to you. If you understand the science behind them, and we can try and help you understand the science behind them, then you can apply the same sessions to a range of different scenarios and settings, and work around the constraints that you have, because not every situation is perfect. Not every situation will be perfect. And it's probably naive to think that it will be perfect. And actually placing yourself in circumstances and scenarios where you are challenged is going to be really important for you to develop as a coach or a scientist, to overcome some of that adversity, to get creative, to think about solutions, and to then put an extra tool in your toolbox, and then being able to pull that out and go, I remember what we did there last time. We did that, we did this, and that seemed to work well. But I think the key thing is, and you'll talk about this, and you talk a bit about with Pete, like with this, is reflection on that. Why it worked, what didn't work about it, what source of information could you have used, should you have used next time, are there any experiences that you would have drawn on? So reflecting upon that and trying to collect a little bit of data about that as well. So what were some of the physiological responses, what were some of the heart rate responses, what was RPE, things like that, and just gathering little bits of data and information to try and tweak that process and make it much more efficient each time you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. When I've been doing the red zone runs, it's been hard to kind of pace them first few reps, because it is trial and error. You don't know how you're going to be to the outdoor running. The surface can play a big factor. When I was running the other day, the wind played a big factor on how much distance I could cover. So it's just about like kind of writing stuff down, being reflective, taking as much data as you can. If you've got a heart rate monitor, use that. But you're saying about them sessions in the car park when we're out in doing our course in London, we haven't got access to the lactate analyzer, so we use rate of perceived exertion, RPE, instead. And I listened to podcasts with Tony Sturdwick, who is a well-renowned sports scientist in football, many years at Manchester United. And they said before GPS kind of came about, they were just using RPE, and look how successful Man United were back in them days, and they're just using a simple scale of 1 to 10 of how hard a session was and the duration, and they managed to manage the training loads and obviously build a successful team. Let's talk a little bit more about running, Alan. So high intensity interval training, I think that looking on like kind of social media, a lot of boxers were starting to do like more treadmill based runs, doing high intensity interval training, but because that's been kind of taken away from them, I've been seeing a lot more 10Ks, 12Ks, some are even trying to run marathons as well. So it's like they've gone back into endurance mode, and maybe that's because they find it difficult to implement kind of like sprint, like kind of high intensity sessions. So what are the key considerations that you got to make when implementing like a HIIT session outdoors?
That does seem interesting that they've reverted back to type, doesn't it? And you see a lot of longer endurance ones. Maybe because one of the things is because they don't have access to a coach, and interval training is pretty tough, and you kind of need a bit of support as well, especially if there's multiple components to that session as well. So maybe they just feel like they need an extra little bit of support and guidance along with that. Maybe they just need a little bit of help getting through the session. But it's interesting to note that they are going back to that. To be honest, it's easier, isn't it? It's easier just to keep ticking over and do that. Maybe it's a coaching thing. Maybe the coaches have gone, do you know what, just tick over. Maybe it's just easy for the coach. But it's not actually that difficult to do HIIT sessions. I mean, for one, all you got to do is look on Red Zone Running, scroll down, put your finger on a session if you just want to have a session, and just replicate that. You'd be quite fortunate if you landed on the Norwegian, which is 4 minutes on, 2 minutes off. Do that 4 times. So things that you would need to get started with a HIIT run, Red Zone Running, number one, or Boxing Science HIIT program. There's loads of sessions in there to get started with HIIT, and loads of good guidance on how to do that. So heart rate monitor, you don't even need a heart rate monitor. Maybe just somewhere to log your effort, which should be 9 out of 10 every time for a HIIT-based session. But a heart rate monitor would be a good start. We use Wahoo tickers. They're about 40 quid from Amazon. And they seem to be delivering those fairly quickly from what I've seen. Then Polar Beat is what we use as an app to get started. So you can download that for your iPhone or for your Android phone, and set that up, put your details in, height, weight, body weight. I think that's all you need for that, or max heart rate, and then it will automatically set your zones, and that can push up to the cloud if you want to do a bit more data analysis on that. Then think about where you're going to do the runs after that. So is it going to be on the road? Is it going to be on the field? Is it going to be a grass-based session? Are you going to do it on a pitch? And then think about, if you're going to do it on a pitch, how long is that pitch? There's a few ways in which you can track that. You can get that Polar Beat app that I've just mentioned, and you can actually run the length of a pitch, and that will pick up with your GPS the length of the pitch. Or you can use a online map, and you can just literally just drop a marker on a map, and then another marker, another straight line, and see what the distance is. Typically, most football and rugby pitches will be about 100 meters long. Or you might have a loop around a local green space or park. That's good. Sometimes on Strava, on an app called Strava, people have logged the total distance of a loop, and they've set up a segment for it, so you'll be able to know that. So for example, if you're doing the Norwegian session, the 4-minute session, you can have a look to see whether that loop is around about 1 kilometre. If it is, then, and you do it in 1 kilometre, then you know you're doing it in 15 kilometres per hour. So getting set up, and then you mentioned pacing as well. Now, pacing to start with is really quite difficult, especially when you've got the natural elements playing a part in the session as well. So if you mentioned the wind the other day, if you're running lengths up and down a pitch, that's going to make one part of that run a lot harder than the other part of that run. So getting that pacing right is important. And you're really going to really figure that out and know that after you've done a few runs. So think about effort out of 10, and think about pacing that appropriately. Your job for that session is to cover the whole session at the highest possible, fastest possible speed overall as an average. That's what your job is. So there's no point in going out and absolutely smashing it for the first reps if your latter reps are going to be well below speed targets. And all our sessions have speed targets. That's the most important thing. So you'll be able to see on your app, on your phone, what speed range you should be, whether you're in beginner or whether you're in advanced. We've got a range of speeds, and you should be able to choose what's appropriate for you. But you should be able to see how fast you're running, what effort you're putting in for each rep, and use that as a guide. And then sometimes it just takes two or three sessions to get used to the pacing, and work through that system, and just getting to know the session, know how it feels. So if you're worrying about pacing to start with, don't worry about it. Just give it 2 or 3 sessions, repeat the session. There's nothing wrong with repeating the session, getting comfortable with it. And if anything, you'll get some confidence from it, because you'll see improvements as well quite quickly. And we know that's what happens with HIIT anyway. And one part of that is being able to pace the sessions a little bit better, as well as the physiological responses you get from that.
Good stuff, Alan. Some good advice on kind of monitoring pacing, and obviously like kind of what sessions that they should be doing as well. I think on like the red zone running sessions, we are converting the speeds into meters. We're also doing that on the HIIT program for boxing and combat sports, the boxing science one. But this can be a little bit confusing when we're doing load 1, load 2, load 3, and this can be quite difficult to implement. To get started, you can just do, like say, the 4-minute on, 2-minute off. Try and aim for about 1 kilometre or 900 metres or something like that. Have 2 minutes rest, and then go again. That will hit your speed, your target speed, and you will be spending some time in the red zone. And if you're not doing that in the first 2 reps, go that little bit faster. Challenge yourself to cover a little bit more distance in that. And then if you're wanting to run a little bit faster, Alan mentioned the Va-Va-Voom session, which is 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, covering about 150 metres. If you just do a straight line, 150 metres, straight line back, and then that's, that's pretty easy to implement. It'll get your heart rate firing. And then you've got like a simple Tabata, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. I was hitting 110 metres in that the other day, so that's around about length of a football pitch. Basically run a length of football pitch, rest for 10 seconds, run back. do that 8 times, rest 2 minutes, and then go again. So then, that I think that's given people something to go away with. But definitely get yourself onto Red Zone Running, Boxing Science Instagram pages, because we're going to be sharing some more running sessions. I'm going to talk about strength training now, and the first point that I've written down is actually doing sprinting. So before we actually move on to strength training, another good kind of high intensity conditioning method would be to do some 30-second max out sprints up a hill. What do you think to that, Al?
Well, I've made my wife do it a few times, haven't I, down the back of ours. We live next to our garden is on the back of the garden is on like it's about 250 meters long, something like that. It's like a road that leads down to the park where we do our where we're doing our HIIT sessions at the moment. But it's on a 3% gradient. Yes, I have measured the gradient. That's what I do. So I've mapped it. So I know exactly. So I know it's 3%, and it's actually pretty consistent 3% gradient. And what Beck does when she doesn't have time to do a full blown session, or if she's got the kids can just ride the bike and explore around the park bit. And she can blast up this hill, 3% hill, for 30 seconds and not get too far away from them. So she can still kind of see them in the blurry vision. She kind of knows what they're doing. Lachlan's normally riding his bike up and down. Indy's normally riding a scooter or something like that, or in her own little world. But she can blast and do a 30-second maximum effort from the bottom up. She probably does about 175 meters, something like that. So this little turnaround circle. So she's got her own little marker that she knows she has to hit each time. But she smashes it. So it's 100% effort. It's max effort. There's no getting around it, and it is sprinting and it's sprint interval training. And the idea is that you hit the intervals as hard and as fast as possible. Okay. Thinking a little bit about technique, thinking a little bit about arm drive and knee drive, but the main focus is giving maximum effort in the first half of the run. Not too bothered about distances. It's mainly about effort, particularly when you're outside. You can control a few more variables when you're doing it on the curves, but when you're outside, or whether you're on the curve, the first thing that you can control is that initial effort and that attack, and that's what we want to do with those intervals. The first half needs to be attacked. And the reason why we ask for that is because we want to deplete the muscle's energy pool as quickly as possible. Because that, through the session and at the end of the session, is going to lead to cell signaling responses that will enable the muscle to start its adaptive process. And if you can repeat that over time, then you're going to get some very potent adaptations from that for aerobic performance, even though you're doing 30-second max effort sprints. So for a really potent, effective session, and we've talked about the Norwegian and the Vavavooms, but you can also do 30 seconds, have 3 minutes rest, and repeat that four times, or up to 6 times. So really, it's anywhere between 2 and 3 minutes running, and the rest of the time you try to find ways to recover, because it is pretty tough, and you'll know if you've done it right, because you'll feel like you're in pain.
Yeah, we're talking about that RPE. It's kind of off the RPE scale. If you feel like that is way more than like a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, then you've definitely done it right.
Yeah, you'll get to the end of the third rep and you'll be like, I can't do a fourth one. Can't do it.
So if you're on like we'd recommend this to be either done like on a grassy field, or like kind of a hill incline, like say something around about 3%, maybe even higher. I'm going to try it and actually do this on the. I'm going to do it. If I put it on the podcast, then I've got to do it, haven't I? So
I didn't want to pressurize you into it, or say you're going to try it out. But now you said it.
I'm going to try it out. I don't know why, but in terms of like kind
But
of
that hill's about.
go on.
That hill, Danny, it's about 7%.
Oh, I'll do it. I'll smash it. Anything for a few views. So to review that, so Alan was discussing there the maximum sprints. They're doing 30 seconds on, absolute max effort, 3 minutes total recovery, and we do that for 4 repetitions. And you mentioned there, Alan, about depleting the muscle, and well, it made me actually think that this is actually a great time for boxers to be actually doing this, because they're not in a calorie deficit and they're not being fatigued by too higher boxing training loads as well. So they could actually hit higher speeds, which will encourage like kind of increase physiological adaptations as well. So it's definitely a good time to be able to do it. As I was mentioning there about like kind of not being in a calorie deficit, this can actually be quite challenging for your strength training. And even though you're going to be fresher for your strength training, so you've got the ability and the opportunity to get stronger, but also you could increase muscle mass. And if you are doing a lot of kind of body weight workouts and you're doing loads of repetitions, you're increasing your volume, you're increasing your time under tension, and when you're doing press-ups, it's quite a lot of mechanical stress as well, you could end up like increasing muscle mass, and muscle mass in areas that you don't want. Upper body, arms. We said in the previous podcast that we want to increase pound for pound muscle mass in our core and our lower body. If we don't want to do it at all, if people are, before lockdown, we're going to be tight at the weight and have to go through kind of really stringent nutritional strategies to be able to make the weight. If they go away and start doing body weight training, high amount of reps, high amount of volume, not in a calorie deficient state, then they're going to increase muscle mass. So you've got to be quite clever around kind of the training methods that you do select. If you haven't got any access to like weights or resistance bands, there's a range of methods that you can do to stay strong but be explosive. And we just mentioned about sprinting there. It doesn't have to be for a condition element, but it can also be great for your speed and kind of muscle activation. If you do 10 seconds on and have 4 minutes off, you're going to be firing that neuromuscular system. And then you've got like plyometrics, so like doing jumps, repeated counter movement jumps, doing some short ground contact work. But what is also important is that we're saying about muscle mass is that we're retaining trunk muscle mass, because when we're not being exposed to heavy lifts such as like squats and deadlifts, heavy pressing, we're reducing that amount of load that's actually going through the core muscles. So we can decrease like kind of like that core strength and that core muscle mass, which is so important not only for delivering fast and hard punches, but also for an injury prevention point of view. And when you go back to training, there's going to be an increase in boxing training load, which can leave you I can't even say it, can put you at risk of getting injured. And that's something that we mentioned in the summit with Rob Madden last year, where Rob Madden's a physiotherapist, and asked him what is the biggest injury risk for boxers, and I expected him to say, wrists, shoulders, something quite technical, but it is that increase in training load.
Yeah, and one of the things that can creep up on boxers is the amount of endurance that they're doing as well. Remember, that can also increase training load. But as well as training load, you've also got monotony as well, and along with that, you've got strain, and after that, you're probably going to pick up a few niggles and injuries and things like that. Just one thing I would wanted to add to your point about boxers now have an opportunity to put on muscle mass. One of the things we've got to think about is doing it in the right way, because you could put on some lean tissue, but you might not be able to activate that lean tissue as much as you would have done if you were back training, you were back boxing, because there's not that high velocity, that high speed, high threshold motor unit activation that you would be engaging with in a normal training setting. And so putting plyometrics into the training plan, putting a bit of speed work into the training plan is not only going to keep athletes fresh, but it's also going to help them retain that capability to produce force very, very quickly, and train rate of force development, which we know is a key aspect of boxing performance and combat sport performance.
Absolutely. And some of the methods that I went on the other day on a YouTube video, if you haven't seen it yet, it's basically how to train with zero equipment. And the only piece of equipment that I do say is doing some towel pulls, and this is something that I know that's GB Boxing are using, some isometric pulls. That can be good for kind of that rate of force development and that max strength aspect. If you do see the videos that we post on Instagram and YouTube of that session, just approach that with caution if you haven't done like kind of isometrics before, because if you don't know how to kind of tense up and drive through that floor, you can start super compensating using your lower back and areas that we don't want to be kind of activating. So another key thing before we move on is challenging your mobility. When we train, in a normal training camp, we do mobility training, but an athlete is getting sore and tight from the hours that they're spending in the boxing gym, the hard runs, and we're basically just working against this kind of soreness and this tension that's being created by the high training loads. So if you've got a decreased training load at the moment, it's a fantastic opportunity for you to actually increase your mobility and your flexibility, especially around the hips and shoulders. So we talked a lot about training. This isn't the hardest part, I think, of lockdown. I think the hardest part is your mindset, your motivation, and your mental well-being as well, because it is tough. Athletes can be training hard, but when they haven't got a goal set in mind, or they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, it can be quite hard on motivation and commitment. So a little bit earlier this week, I talked to sports psychologist Dr. Pete Olusoga, and here's a short bit of the interview where he's going to be talking about raising that motivation and being able to kind of reflect on the tasks that you're doing. And the full interview is fantastic because he's talking about kind of anxiety control, goal setting as well. So let's have a listen to what Pete had to say. I've talked to quite a few of my athletes that I work with, and they're low on motivation and they're feeling bad for it. And I'm just saying, you are going to feel low on motivation. So I've been setting them minimum tasks to do, to do whilst they're being in low motivation, just keep them ticking along. You don't have to be going out 100% training like you normally do when you're 5 weeks away from a fight. If you just do the minimum, just allow yourself to do the minimum to get by, to tick over, to be ready when we're back ready to train and compete again. And then that's probably the best thing that you can do. But in terms of that low motivation, what are the different ways that you can increase motivation, especially during lockdown?
You and I have talked about motivation before, haven't we? We've talked about the difference between perhaps motivation and commitment. And you're absolutely right. Motivation can be pretty low at times, and it can be really high at other times. It fluctuates, right? Because motivation's kind of more of a feeling, whereas commitment's more of an action. Yeah. So I could kind of explain what I mean by that. So, like, are you ever motivated to like do the dishes or hoover the floor? You ever kind of like, right, brilliant, dishes time, gonna do that now? You ever feel like that? Probably not.
I'll probably call to action if I'm going to get told off for not doing it.
Right, but we're never really motivated to do stuff like that. I don't have like a high level of motivation to do the dishes, but I am committed to having a house that isn't like filthy and stinky. Yeah. So I just do it because that's my commitment, right? And then when you do it, you go, "Oh, I've got a tidy house, right? It's nice. I like having a tidy house. That's a nice feeling. So I'm therefore a little bit more motivated to maybe do it next time. But that motivation is a feeling that comes and goes. So like, we talked about training before and how I'm adapting my training. I'm not motivated to get up at 5:30 in the morning to get a workout in. Like I like staying in bed, right? I'm not motivated to do that. But I am committed to doing some exercise every day, right? So I get up and I do it and I go outside, and then you do a little bit of exercise, you feel good, and then that increases your motivation to perhaps do it the next time. So rather than focusing on like increasing motivation, again, it's maybe just accepting that sometimes you're going to be really motivated to do something, and sometimes you're just not, right? Instead, can I make those commitments to doing something? So like you said, can I make a commitment to just doing something every day? Something's better than nothing, yeah? And if I can commit to that and follow through on that and do it, then maybe gradually I'll get that feeling of motivation again. But yeah, it's about making those commitments. Okay, what is it that I'm going to really kind of just commit to doing? Write that stuff down, you know. And if it's the bare minimum, it's the bare minimum. That's absolutely fine. Again, it's kind of accepting that this is an extraordinary situation, and I can do what I can do and no more.
Yeah. So the final thing that I'm going to talk about, and all this full kind of like interview and discussion has been fantastic, and I think that a lot of people in general, not just athletes and coaches, will take a lot of value from it, and will be feeling a lot better about their training, about the work, and kind of work-life balance. But a lot of coaches will be watching this, and some athletes will be. But how does a coach get all this kind of information and kind of help kind of filter that down to an athlete? So what should coaches be doing to help an athlete psychologically during this point?
Okay, so this is an interesting one because this is kind of like my area of research about coaches and coaching stress and burnout. And to be honest, the thing that coaches can do to help their athletes the most is to look after themselves. Um, Coaches have a tendency to look after their athletes, and rightly so. That's their jobs. They feel they have a duty of care to their athletes. That the kind of priority. I need to look after these guys. And as I say, that's exactly how it should be. But if they're not looking after themselves as well, then they're not going to be any use. So all of the stuff that we've talked about being accepting of their own kind of responses and feelings towards what's happening, setting themselves goals, all of the skills that they would want their athletes to show, all of the skills that they would want their athletes to learn and to be doing during this, like practice that yourself. So like be mindful, take a step back and do some take some time to relax, set yourself to-do lists, write yourself goals, all of those things that we've talked about. I would encourage coaches to be doing exactly the same thing. Looking after their own well-being is paramount, because if you're trying to deal with all of this stuff that's going on, all of this kind of stuff that's flying around right now, whilst also looking after a bunch of athletes that you coach and making sure that they're doing okay, you're going to come unstuck eventually. So look after yourself first, and then kind of take care of your athletes. I guess in terms of kind of some of the more practical stuff, again, I think we're in a period of social distancing. I think physical distancing is probably more appropriate because we can be physically distant but maintain like social contact, right? So one of the first things that I did when I knew that I wasn't going to be able to get in the gym was I texted a friend and said, look, let's send each other workouts. Let's keep each other accountable, so that we kind of like, keeping each other motivated, keeping each other kind of committed to staying healthy, right? So I think coaches have perhaps got a role there, keeping their athletes together, keeping their athletes socially connected, even if they're physically distant from one another. And, we've got the technology to do that these days. We've got WhatsApp, we've got Zoom, we've got Skype, we've got all these things to kind of keep ourselves connected socially. I think it's more important to do that now than maybe it ever has been before. Keeping that kind of sense of community with your athletes is something that's really important. And I think, coaches have perhaps got a role to play in that.
So that was a fantastic little snippet of the interview that I did with Pete earlier this week. If you want to have full access to that, that's on our YouTube channel. So make sure you go and check that out, where he's going to be talking about motivation, anxiety control, goal setting, and reflective practices. And I think that this is going to be really beneficial to athletes, and it's going to be beneficial to coaches and people just in general, because it is a tough lockdown. We can't pretend that we're being positive 100% of the time. You only see like the kind of things on Instagram where people are spreading positive vibes and saying how productive they're going to be, but really people are going to be getting up that little bit later, taking the foot off the gas a little bit, watching Tiger King on Netflix. What kind of things have you been doing, Alan, to kind of keep yourself motivated and committed to training and to work as well?
First of all, I've watched Tiger King. I thought it was very good. I'd probably give it a 4.5 stars out of 5. 4 stars out of 5. Got a little bit loose in the middle, but then they brought it back towards the end. So that's my review of Tiger King. What have I been doing? I've got myself on a structured plan, and I'm following a plan, and I know it's a plan that I've created, but I've done it months ago. So I'm on the Red Zone Running 10K plan. So I'm doing that, and I'm trying to follow that as much as possible. I'm also doing sessions and trying to film those for you guys and for people that follow Red Zone Running as well. So that's keeping me motivated. I'm on Zwift on the bike on the indoor trainer doing some of their events. So they're putting on some good events. So I've done a tour, which is like a 5-day tour, and then I've done a really long hilly ride as well. And then you get, it sounds sad, but you'll know this if you like games and things, but there's like levels, and there's different things you can unlock at different levels. And if you've climbed 50,000 meters on Zwift, then you unlock something that's called a Tron bike. It's a concept bike, and it's got flashing wheels. So it reminds me of those things I used to put on my bike when I was younger. Those little flashing things that used to spin round on your spokes. So I really want that. So virtually, I've been trying to get these wheels. I think I should do it in the next the bike. I think I should do it in the next couple of weeks. But it's just having like that is not even a seriously big goal. Like last year, this time last year, I was preparing for the World Championships in duathlon, which is a massive goal for me, big lifetime goal to represent Great Britain. But now, in this period of time especially, I'm chasing some flashing wheels. So I've got some goals, but they're not big goals. They're not huge. I've got a little bit of structure in place. I've not got any set time to go out and do a session. I'm not getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm not getting up at what I used to do, 5 o'clock in the morning, and go for an hour's run. I'm not putting pressure on myself to be training twice a day. But what I am being is consistent, and I think understanding that consistency is key, and being relaxed in that approach, and having some mini goals but not having things that are too serious has really helped me be consistent. And I'm training some of the best I've trained in over the last 10 months or so. Obviously I had the accident and things like that, but I'm being very consistent. Like I mentioned, I had a good run yesterday, so I can see the progress, I can see improvements, and I've just been relaxed along with it. There's nothing really revolutionary about what I'm doing and how I'm staying motivated. Yeah, that's what I'm doing, just chasing bikes.
Yeah, I think for me, from a working point of view, the reason why I love what I do so much is because it's so varied. I'm doing something more or less different every day. I'm coaching different athletes, different types of athletes. I've obviously got a lot of online content to do with boxing science and red zone running, so everything's quite different and varied. Whereas now in lockdown, every day is more or less the same. So I've had to try and find some sort of variety, working on different projects, changing up my training more or less every day, trying to do something a little bit different. Might not be good from a physiological point of view, but from psychological, it's keeping me fresh and keeping me consistent training as well. In terms of like coaching, the reason why I enjoy coaching so much is because I love that kind of social interaction. So when you're stuck in the house and you've only got your partner to talk to, you've got to kind of make that extra effort to have that social interaction. That doesn't mean that you've got to phone your friends every day. It don't mean that you've got to do a quiz with your family every day. I'm on 3 quizzes a week at the minute, so I'm going to come out with like loads of random facts, like Henderson's Relish was founded in 1885. Did you know that?
No, that's around about the same time in which stainless steel was invented, isn't it? We've had that one. Have you not had that
Don't
question
know.
yet?
I think I had that. I had a like Sheffield and Yorkshire quiz. So if people don't know what Henderson's Relish is, Google it, because Henderson's Relish will change your life. Put it in. You can put it on anything: cheese on toast, beef stew, anything. Anyway, that's going off topic a little bit. But I'm having social interaction more or less every day. Like I said, it don't have to be like just phoning somebody up and saying how your day's been. Doing different things like podcasts with yourself. I'm doing a live Q&A a little bit later on. I'm doing a live boxing science training session, so I'm going to be able to see all the athletes. I'm doing one-to-one sessions as well via FaceTime. So I'm finding a variety of different ways to still have that social interaction, which I think is quite important. And I think what will be a good point now is to bring Jordan Gill in. So now we're going to talk to Jordan Gill. Jordan is a featherweight professional boxer. He's been on the programme for 5 years, and he's been out of the ring for quite a while due to illness that I got towards the back end of last year, sorry. And it was raring to go March 28th, and 10 days before the fight, that fight got pulled. Obviously, a lot of different sporting events got pulled as well. So he was quite frustrated, disappointed, obviously, because he wants to get back into the ring. And now he's training hard back at home in Chatteris, ready and waiting for that next opportunity to come along. So we're talking a lot from a coach's and a sports scientist point of view, but what does it actually look like for an athlete? So let's have a chat with Jordan. So we're live in Chatteris with Jordan the Thrill Gill. Jordan, you don't look like lockdown's treating you too badly.
Do you know what? We live in a quarantine dream in Chatteris. I think a lot of people got it a lot worse off than us. So we're quite lucky. We're just at home chilling. Weather's nice. We've got food in the fridge and we've got a roof over our head. So buzzing, really.
I just mentioned on the podcast, obviously, all this happened at probably the worst possible time for you. You're just about to get back into the ring 10 days in advance, and then it's taken away from you. Well, it's taken away from everyone. How did you initially deal with that disappointment, and how have you kind of carried on your training?
Actually, it was more the case that it was a relief in a funny way. It was more of a relief because for the weeks leading up to it, obviously you look at the news, you're hearing these debates are having on the news, and you're thinking, is this fight going to go ahead? Isn't it? Is it not? So it was a few weeks of not knowing whether I was fighting or not. So having to maintain that discipline with diet, training, sparring, etc. Well, knowing that there's a good chance you're not going to be fighting. When you actually found out, I was more relief than anything, just because not knowing was hard. So to find out either way was good. But then that's when the disappointment hit, because obviously I was training so hard for it. Leading up to that fight, I'd come back from obviously a long time out of the ring, and an illness that was out of my control as well. So it was tough, a lot of disappointment, but we've had setbacks before, and this time, whereas last time boxing was taken away from me in December when I should have had a big fight, because I had a comeback fight in September in Italy, and that was a springboard to push on to a big fight, which was supposed to happen in December. And then I was diagnosed with a thyroid condition, which meant that boxing was taken away from me. And then obviously got back into shape, got my health right, and pushed on for this one, and then it was taken away from me again. But I think what's consoled me and given me a little bit of comfort is the fact that it's not just me. Like sometimes when everything's going against you, you can sometimes feel like the whole world's against you, and it's just me, and everyone's got. You think maybe there's someone upstairs got a vendetta towards me, and everything's been taken away. But it's not just me. Everybody's in the same boat. Whether somebody might work in a shoe shop and really like selling shoes, and they look forward to getting up every morning and going to work and measuring people's feet, and that's been taken away from them. So it's been taken away from me, and there's nothing I can do. But we can just persist, get your head around it. You're gonna have a time where you think, it's the world against me, and it's not good. But it takes a few days to get your head around it, and you can just crack on to what you normally do. Obviously, the best boxers, the most successful boxers, treat boxing as a lifestyle, and I've continued training the way I normally would. I love training. I love doing my weights. I love doing the boxing, take or leave running. But we've been carrying on all these boxing sessions. I've been keeping up with it, and it takes the pressure off as well, because if there's no date in sight, there's no fight. If you grind yourself into the ground every day, training 6 days a week, probably twice a day, most of them days, it can get by the end of the camp, you can feel tired. So in this point, we're training, but if we feel like we need a day off, we can afford to have one, because we're not chasing weight, we're not chasing a date. We don't need to get sparring in because we're not got a fight date, but we're training to improve. And I think that's made a difference as well. So I'm enjoying it, and just training as hard as I can with what I've got, and making the best of what I've got.
Yeah, and you're saying about like training when you can, when you feel like it, to kind of tick over, and that's good for a physiological point of view and psychological point of view as well. And what you said about like everybody being in the same boat, which they are, that there's a lot of boxers at the moment, and there'll be a lot of athletes listening to this now thinking kind of, what do I do like now? How do I adapt? So what do you see the biggest challenges are for boxers, and what are the challenges that you've faced, and how have you adapted around that?
I think there's one of the biggest things is probably equipment, what they used to having and haven't got, and having to adapt to probably not having a coach on board, and these are challenges we've had to adapt to. But I'm quite lucky in a sense, probably more than other people, that the person that trained me from an amateur was my dad, and he's in the house. We were all isolating together, and I've got him. He's got some pads. At the start, we didn't have a bag, but I've managed to order a bracket from Decathlon, and at the start, I nicked a bag from my friend. So we put a bag up in the garden. It was since ordered, and replaced that bag with one from Geezer's Boxing, who sorted us out. And you just sort of you get the equipment you need, or even if you haven't got any equipment, you make the best of what you got. We did pads this morning, and we probably didn't move more than 3-4 square meters. So if people are making excuses, they haven't got the space or they haven't got the time. Everyone's got the time now. That's not an excuse you can have. So I think you just have to adapt, and if you've got a set of mini bands, boxing science mini bands, then you can make a good enough session out of anything. I think you get your weights done. I'm probably lucky that I've got more equipment available to me than most people, but there's been a few challenges, but you make the best of what you got. Like I say, I'm lucky to have you on the end of the phone. I've got Dave on the end of the phone, so If you've got a coach that normally coach, give him a ring, tell him what you've been doing, or see what he suggests you do. Whether you've got somebody that helps you with running mechanics and give you a new exercise for hip mobility, that's going to help your running technique, then these are things that you've got time to work on now. And like, everybody's got modern technology now. Everybody has got a mobile phone. Almost 9 times out of 10, most people have got a mobile phone and mobile data. They can go on YouTube and find a new workout. They can go on Boxing Science and get a mini band routine. They can FaceTime their coach and show them what they've been working on and get pointers that way. So everybody can do something.
Yeah, 100%. And I like what you say there about like using modern technology. There's so much information out there and ways that you can still connect with your coach, with different members of the gym as well, where you can reach out and get that advice. But also you've got the old school ways as well. A lot of old school fighters didn't have access to the big fancy gyms and labs and doing everything like that. So there's plenty of ways that you can still get fit and strong.
Yeah, exactly. You can do loads of bodyweight circuits. You can find a couple of rocks in the garden, do weighted shadowboxing, holding the rocks, like old school sort of things. You can put some Timberland boots on and go for a little jog. I don't know if you'd recommend it, but Ali used to run in Timberland boots, so it worked all right for him. There's loads of things that you can get adaptation out of, and I think probably the biggest attribute you could have in times like this is imagination, and using your imagination to get some sort of adaptation out of your training and some sort of improvements. Because like you say, even like 1% is better than 0.
Motivation is a massive factor. We can talk about all like kind of the different training techniques, the different adaptations, but if you're not motivated and committed, then that all goes out the window. What are you doing to stay motivated? Because you haven't got that end goal in sight and a lot of uncertain times.
I don't know. I think, like anybody, my motivation goes up and down. I'll be the first person to tell you that some days, probably more times than often not, like in this time, I'll get up in the morning and think, I'll get up with good intentions, and I'll think, I'm going to have breakfast and we're going to do a big session, and then we'll smash it out. And then you have breakfast, you sit around for a bit too long, you can't really be bothered. But, I do it because it's what I do. I think motivation always up and down like that. But if you just do it because it's part of your routine, then you get the work done. And even if you turn up like in a 50% state of mind, if your body's there, then you're getting that adaptation out of it. And then when you do come to fight, then these sessions that you've been doing, and they all add up. And I think that's important. But like I said, everyone's got to have some sort of motivation. And in times like this, one thing I use for motivation is food, because we're all sitting around, we're doing nothing. We're allowed out for an hour a day, can do a walk. We're in really, it's like solitary confinement. And the way I see it, it's easy to sit around and get fat because we're probably expending a lot less energy. We're doing a lot less steps than we normally would. We're not picking up things and moving them over there because we're in the house and everything's done for us. Like everything's like the way it should be. So the way I see it is, if I don't get up and do that session, then there's a good chance I'm not going to be allowed carbs in that meal, or as many I'm not burning as many calories as I should be, and I don't want to sit around and get fat, because when the time comes to fight, then it's going to be a hard road back. It's going to make my job harder when the time comes around. So that's one of the motivations. But like I said, the main thing for me is the fact that I've integrated boxing into my life. So I'll get up in the morning, have a breakfast and do a session just because it's what I do. And there's probably only 1, maybe 2 days a week that I don't get up in the morning and do a session. So it's just part of life. And if you make it a lifestyle, then it's not a chore.
Yeah, you're keeping that routine and keeping that schedule in place, and that is keeping you on track. You mentioned about nutrition there. What kind of things have you done to adapt your diet, and how easy has it been to follow?
Do you know what? I've just relaxed a bit. I've relaxed a bit and enjoyed the meals. And I think one of the biggest things about this lockdown is, for us, we're probably, like I said, we're lucky that there's 6 of us in this house isolating, and we're all sat in the house together. Like, obviously there's different rooms, so we can go and spend time. I can spend time with my wife, and like everyone can be separate, but everyone comes together at night, and the meal feels like an occasion. So we've been eating really well because these meals, what we've been making, we've put a lot of effort into it, because the evening meal is an occasion. So we've knocked up a salad for lunch, no problem. But the evening meal, we've made sure I've fried them onions an extra 5 minutes. I've made sure I've sprinkled the extra little bit of salt on, because it's an occasion. We want it to taste nice. So I don't know. I think that's been good. What I've adapted is cut my calories down a little bit. But before this lockdown came, I'd been dieting solid for about 8 or 9, maybe 10 weeks up to this point, and it's been very strict and very, very regimented and very hard, mentally and physically. So I've relaxed a bit. I've put a couple of pounds on, and enjoyed my food, and I think that's more than anything been important, because it's sort of mentally reset me, and I'm enjoying my meals. I'm making sure that I'm making conscious, healthy decisions. I've cut carbs out when I don't need them, around training, and put in a little bit more fat to fuel just everyday activity. So yeah, all you can do is adapt the carbs around sessions, and be kind to yourself. If you fancy a protein bar, have a protein bar. It's not going to be the end of the world. If you fancy a bit of ice cream, have a bit of ice cream, but just don't go mad, and enjoy yourself, really, I think.
Yeah, I like the thing that you said about like having that family meal time. You're spending a long time indoors, isolated. I think it's a good time to like kind of connect and spend time with your family, and dinner time is a massive part of that. And that's something that Lee Rickards mentioned in, we did a Q&A with him yesterday, and that's kind of what he's put for Sheffield United players to do, not go, right, this is your strict diet to make sure that you're in the best shape possible when you return back to training. Is they've given them like kind of loose guidelines, make sure that you're having a set amount of protein for your dinner, any kind of form, making sure that you're having veg, and then he's put like kind of plans in place for them to have meal time with the family as well, because as well, when they return back to football, it's very likely that they're going to be in quarantine in football senses, in the hotel with the football players, being just playing twice a week, training hard and everything like that, and away from their families. So
everyone as athletes, especially boxers, everyone as athletes know what they should be eating. They know they should be eating balanced. They know what portion sizes are appropriate to them. They know that they should be having some carbs around training. They know that they should be having protein probably with every meal, and they know what a portion looks like. They know that they should be putting fats in when they're not, when they're rested, and you have to put fat into burn fat. So everybody knows what they should be eating and the portion size they should be having, but it's tempting not to have a bit extra, or it's tempting not to keep looking in the fridge every 20 minutes because the boredom factor. But way I see it is, now's a good time to try new recipes. So if I know that in a meal I'm allowed 1 portion of fat, 1 portion of carbs, and 1 portion of protein, then I know I'm allowed 100 gram of meat or 120 gram of meat. I'm allowed 60 gram of pasta or rice, or 150 gram jacket potato or sweet potato, or you could even make it in a chips or whatever, and then I'm allowed half an avocado or an egg or 2. Then you can look at these lists of options, and now's a good time to experiment, saying, right, what I'm going to have this source of protein, this source of pasta, this source of carbohydrate, this source of fat, and you can mix and match it, and now's a good time to sort of have a look at recipes, and as well you can monitor your weight around, experiment with these things, because sometimes your weight changes through different things that you eat, so you can check your body's responses without having too much pressure on making them weights in the morning. So I think that's a good thing to do.
100%. Jordan, that's been a fantastic insight. I think people listening to this will take a lot from it. Instead of listening to us coaches and scientists, what does it actually look like from an athlete's point of view? I think it's really important.
Let's talk about past stuff. Lovely.
Yeah, cheers, Jordan, for your contribution, and good luck for the rest of your training during lockdown. Hopefully, we'll see you in the ring sooner rather than later.
Cheers, mate. We'll do a FaceTime session on the weights tomorrow morning.
Yes, mate. Bright and early, 6 o'clock.
Lovely jubbly. Everyone keep smiling.
So it's great there to get the point of view of Jordan, and it sounds like he's got everything set up. His training's going well. He's doing pads with his dad, who's an experienced amateur boxing coach. Not many people can have that in the back garden. I wish I did. I've tried to get Robin on the pads, but she's not having it. But the key challenges there for Jordan is obviously motivation, but it's nutrition as well. I think this is a massive factor for all athletes. And we talked to Lee Rickards yesterday via Zoom, our weekly webinar, and he was discussing about nutrition. I initially went into that conversation thinking about how many grams of carbs should you be having, how many grams of protein should you be having, and how much do you need to reduce your energy intake by. But it didn't come out with them technical aspects. He more talked about managing a player's behaviour. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think it was fascinating.
It was fascinating. I think where are United at the moment in the league? Fifth, sixth, something like that.
Sixth with a game in hand.
That's, you know, I mean, we know the guys, the sports science team, really well, and it's no coincidence that they've been working together as a unit for a good 3 years now. I think the core team there, and it's no coincidence that when they've been given this opportunity in the Premier League, they had taken it with all of their hands collectively, and with the coaching setup that they've got and the group of players that they've got. I think a lot of people have been surprised about the way they've performed this year. But actually, when you look at the staff that they've got supporting, and the way that Wilder has set up his team, and the way that he approaches, and the camaraderie that they have between them,
it's definitely maximising their potential, which we always talk about from a sports science point of view, is covering the 10% and the 1% to be able to maximise your potential of success. And I think Sheffield United are a great example of that.
Yeah, exactly. Just fantastic to see the way that they've taken to the Premier League in all aspects as well, because we do get insights into what happens in the club and behind closed doors. But it's been fantastic. And one of the things that you mentioned there was that instead of taking a completely scientific view, obviously the strategies that they've put in place are underpinned by science. And I've had 1 or 2 chats with Rob, who's their sports scientist, about their conditioning and how they can implement that, and how then we can transfer some of their conditioning off feet into the training ground. And he's collecting a lot of data on that, and he's got GPS data, pitch-based data. Before lockdown, he's now gathering data from the sessions that the lads are doing in lockdown, and then he's going to recollect some of the data, on-field data, when they come out, and we're going to have a look at how best that transition can occur. But one of the important things that Lee mentioned yesterday was that they've not been so strict and prescriptive in their approach to lockdown, and they've realised that the players are human, and they respond in similar ways to the rest of us. They're not robots. Yes, they might be paid a lot of money, and they might be playing in front of 40,000 people every week, but that doesn't make them any less human, than me or you or anyone else. And they have their own behavioural needs. They have families. They want to relax. They find the pressures of being in lockdown just as tough as everyone else, if not tougher, just because they're used to going into the club every day. They're used to interacting with 20, 30 people in the way that they do, and now they can't do that. So that's a major, it's a major thing that they're missing there. And the club have recognised it, and a lot of their practices that they're doing now around nutrition and around training and strength work is, like you say, it's not about grams per kilo. It's not about hitting so much time in the red zone. Well, it is, and they have to do that, but recognizing that there are limitations to that and being pragmatic and realistic about the situation. And I think a lot of it is driven by consistency and knowing that if they can just keep the lads ticking over, and if they can just get them thinking about some of the basic practices, that 10% that you mentioned, then that's probably going to be worth 20% when they come back to training, and they're not going to be as detrained as they might be. They're going to be in a pretty good place, because every other team is having the same problem at the moment. And the key really is to make sure that when they're allowed to get back on the training ground, this is where the battle's going to be won, is when they can get back on the training ground, which team is in the best place at that point in time. Because what's going to happen is training load's going to increase, the weather's going to get hotter, the pressure is going to get even greater, especially for those down at relegation and battling to stay in the leagues. And everyone's going to have a lot of pressure within the system. And if players have got a little bit of niggles, if they're not feeling as fit as they might be, they can't execute technical drills as well as they could be, set plays, etc., etc. All that's going to build up. And so being prepared on day one, when they get back on the training ground, is number one. And if you've got players that are feeling fresh, that are feeling fit, that are feeling healthy, that have had a good amount of downtime, and that are raring to go, then you're already a step ahead of the game. And that's what I can see United are doing, and that's what they're going for. They're being really pragmatic. They're taking a really humanistic approach to this and realising that the season's going to be really long. And let's not forget that you're going to have probably 2 or 3 weeks pretty tough training, and then you're going to go into a season that's been prolonged as well. So although it may look like it's been 2 or 3, no, probably longer, it'll probably be about, how long will it be? 5-6 weeks off of the season before we get back.
It's been about 4 weeks already.
So on the surface, it might seem like that season's ended now, and then they're just going to do maybe a tournament in the summer, but they've been training all the way through, so it's protracted that season, and that's a big stress as well. So as well as being ready for that first day of training, you've also got to be ready for the last 4 games of the season, which could be happening in end of June, July.
A big thing that what Lee said as well was about the players will be kind of in lockdown again, away from the families, so it's an ideal time to spend with their families because they're going to be taken away. And I think with boxing, they're in lockdown all the time. They train, they go back, they sleep, they train again, they go back, they sleep, and then they're ready for the next day. And if you're treating this lockdown as training camp, and you're being strict to every single gram, it's going to do your head in, because it's going to be a 16 to 20 week training camp. I'm saying this not only do we have to get over this lockdown, so it's going to be 6 weeks in total, at a minimum, and then they're going to be allowed to go back into the boxing gym. They're going to need another 6 weeks of sparring before they're ready to fight. But that is like the minimum time. Like people like Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, all the boxing promoters are going to make sure that they're looking after their number ones first. They're going to have to try and manage so many boxers' expectations and demands of wanting to get back ready. So it might, that training, in 6 weeks' time, you might be starting another 10-week training camp. So you're talking about 20 weeks, and physiologically it's tough, but psychologically it's even harder. And what you don't want to do is have lapses in commitment and dedication when you're 4 weeks out, because that can have a massive impact on your training performance, your competitive performance, and your ability to make weight as well. And so if you're having a little bit more of a relaxation now, obviously eating healthy, making sure that your weight's pretty good. You want to be kind of like, your weight needs to be around about 5 weeks out for when you go back into the gym. So if you're doing things to kind of maintain that, I think it's a good opportunity for boxers as well, because I know that a lot of professional boxers rely on like kind of food preparation services. I think that it'll be great for like boxers to learn how to cook themselves and know kind of like how to manage their macronutrients. You know, and Lee said that it doesn't have to be a very posh dish. I forgot what he said now, wild Alaskan pine nut salad or something like that. It doesn't have to be that. It can be just like chicken, some roast veg, and a bit of rice. And learning how to do that and do that consistently will benefit your long-term career.
Yeah. See, it's really, nutrition's easy really. You can just go on a Cristiano Ronaldo diet. Just grilled chicken and rice. That's it.
Yeah.
Done.
Or fish and a rice cake.
A boxer's diet.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a good way to kind of end the podcast, because we've covered all different areas. I hope everyone's enjoyed it and took some value from it. And these practices that we're talking about high intensity interval training, strength training, psychology and nutrition. There's a lot of science that goes behind it, but the steps are quite simple and effective, and all it takes is for you to be committed to putting them steps into action. So your high intensity interval training, it doesn't have to be so complex. You can just basically run 150 meters, rest for 30 seconds, run 150 meters back. Do that 10 times. Then your strength training, focus on core, focus on your mobility, and then look to try and be fast and explosive. And then for psychology, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Make sure that you're doing a to-do list and then reflecting on the practices that you've been doing during lockdown. And then nutrition is being easy on yourself, trying to be healthy, covering your like kind of 5 to 7 vegetables and fruit, having good source of protein, and not, depriving yourself too much of having a treat. Having a small occasional treat will stop you from kind of going out and doing them massive binges. And also control what you're buying from the shops, because when you start stacking up loads, you start getting a little boredom, looking into the cupboard, seeing what's there, picking at some chocolate. You've just got to kind of be strict with yourself there. Have your treats in very small and structured doses.
Yeah. When I look in my pantry, I just see things like couscous and beans, and that I know I've got to soak overnight, so that just puts me off. But then I look above the top and there's loads of Easter eggs for the kids. So I need to try hard to resist the temptation to eat all those Easter eggs.
Yeah, I've been having chocolate, but I have it at a night where I'm going to watch telly, not like doing work or anything like that. I'm not going right, pick at the cupboard, get out, because you don't realise how many calories you're going to have for the rest of the day. If you're having something like, you go, right, this is when I'm going to have it, and kind of like, and that kind of controls your your tendencies to go and have a little bit too much. Okay, Alan, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for everybody for listening. Thanks, Alan, for your contribution. If you're not a subscriber yet, please subscribe to the channel. We're going to be not only doing these kind of episodes, we're also going to be doing Q&A sessions and 10 to 15 minutes worth of like content on specific areas, whether that's shoulder mobility, whether that's conditioning as well. And then if you'd be kind enough to leave us a 5-star review and a 5-star rating and a review, that'll be much appreciated, as well as it'll help grow the channel. Okay, guys, thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you on the next podcast.